This is Phantom Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Ryan Driskell Tate for the first time. Welcome to the Phantom Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Phantom.
Well, it's fun to talk to people around the world. We've always liked to have these live podcasts to kind of get to the heart of a story. And right now, we've got a link out there for those of you that want to deal with podcasting and figure out how to be a guest on a podcast. So what we have right now is a QR code where you can actually scan that and find out about Podmatch, and that's how we book guests on our show. But other than that, before we get to the heart of our story, we always ask a couple questions of any guest, and that is like, what motivates you and why do you do what you do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I work in energy and climate. I'm a professional historian by training, and the focus of my PhD work, but I actually spend most of my days as an energy analyst, more or less. And I got into this line of work, a little bit of kismet, happy accident. I actually grew up in coal country when I was younger in the northeast of England in County Durham. Went to school in Newcastle, and that's, for people who aren't familiar, that region is like the heartland of British industrialization, mining, steel mills, shipping. And they still have a popular idiom out there, carrying coal to Newcastle. It's like the Dutch expression, carrying water to a well. It's like there's so much. And, I was living there and probably didn't have the terms for it when I was young, like 13, but it was like deindustrialization. It was like after the pit closures in 84 and 85, and a lot of the mines were shutting down. It made a really big impression on me as a young person. My first memory of sort of anything political was like the Durham Miners Gala, which is one of the oldest trade union rallies dating back to the 19th century. It's like miners with brass bands and trade union banners. And I don't know if people have ever seen the movies like Brassed Off or Billy Elliot. That's very much the culture. You'd go down and you would watch the sort of the labor dignitaries kind of giving these big podium thumpy speeches and miners walking through the streets, and definitely imbued early on in school and through that with like a lot of folklore about coal miners. As a teenager though, like I didn't want anything to be a part of that, right? Like I, fast forward in time, but I was in graduate school and I was studying history. I was writing about workers and labor, and I started thinking more about miners. And I ended up, writing about Wyoming and Montana, which was a coal region I didn't really know much about until I started working on it. I was curious about the community, but I was really interested by that point in energy as an infrastructure, as a system. And what it means in terms of, as climate change was becoming more of an issue. I mean, when these mines were getting built, no one was thinking about that until later. So I did a lot of research. I was, out in traveling around about 8 different states in the American West doing research for that, and interviewing ranchers, interviewing some miners. When I was getting done, I remember, realizing that so much of what I was doing was motivated by this kind of question around gathering information and getting data. That's sort of the first thing that happens to any community when a coal company comes knocking is, do we have enough information to have a conversation with them? Do we know what's going on? And actually, that's what the organization I work at now basically does, is provide sort of open source data around energy infrastructures and, who's building what, where, and when, and that kind of thing.
That's interesting. 'Cause my grandpa was a coal miner in West Virginia.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And now they just blow the hills apart. But he was back in the day of actually going in the mine. And
right.
You had to be a electrician, plumber, architect, carpenter. You had a lot of skill sets. And now it's a different world for a lot of those miners, and the mining has kind of dried up. And people are like, it's more like industrial era. The beginning of the Industrial Revolution, like everything's running on coal. Power plants are running on coal. Trains are running on coal. Everything's running on coal. But you have to look at where the world is. You look at AI, right? You look at where the tech is. I'm in tech. I'm in software design. It's like sometimes you get like, well, there's other sources of energy, and there's cost to what the energy. What's the cost of using this energy from a holistic point of view? And you got to balance it out. It's like it's 21st century. It's not 19th century.
Right. I mean, that's actually a thing that's interesting is, it's really fascinating. Your grandfather was a coal miner. I mean, I think that there's, the industry changed a lot in terms of like what the work looked like, going underground versus mountaintop removal, as they call it, which is a nice way of saying blowing the tops off the mountains. I think, a lot of that industry was so heavily, like subsidized in the beginning. I mean, we forget about that at some point you had to get to the mines that were pretty hard to get to. And so governments were having to pay to like dredge rivers and build roads. And there was a lot of, build the railroads and things.
Yeah.
And so a lot of money went into like making the industry operational. And I think that we forget about that sometimes. We kind of act as if everything that's not, existing has to function purely as a free market. But I think that there's actually a precedent for sort of government supporting a lot of that globally.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where the idea is. Like, you think about energy today, is like cutting edge is like fusion. Can we get to fusion? Well, there's a whole infrastructure that's needed for that, right?
Right.
There's infrastructure for if you're going to use solar. There's infrastructure if you're going to use tidal, if you're going to use geothermal, if you're going to use wind.
Right.
And a lot of times that we look at our American infrastructure and like there haven't been a lot of investments since the early Robert Barron days.
Yeah, I mean, a big focus of emphasis too right now is around grids and around transmission lines and things like that, upgrading those, especially and building them out. And honestly, the last time the U.S. did a large expansion of its grid was the 1960s, maybe 1970s.
Yeah, and it's like right now we're feeling the pain because all these AI data centers that are required.
Right.
Well, if you put one of these data centers in, it knocks everybody's bill up.
Yeah.
And so like, and then people was like, well, I didn't buy AI. Like, that's like, why am I paying for it? Is it because the way our system's set up, it's not advantageous to like, why am I paying that bill?
Yeah. And I know that like some of them are experimenting with like off-grid usage, and if they can reduce it for a certain number of hours a year, there's ways to kind of cut the cost that way. But it is like very experimental in some ways, because it's about trying to figure out what's going to work within the existing system and where the system's going to be heading and how it's going to be changing in the future.
Yeah, and then you just have to calculate like, okay, this technology given CO2 is actually putting you on the wrong side of that, right? A lot of the AI data centers are causing us to go in a direction that we were trying to get away from.
Yeah.
Right? So now it's like, how are you going to balance that out?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the data centers have been, and I don't know if it's a footprint issue, if it's about a pacing issue, flexibility, but they've been building a lot of gas power, and actually that's been a big thing that we've talked a little bit about in some of our research. It's just that I think that the U.S. is proposing a huge expansion of its gas power plants, and it's mostly driven by data centers and AI.
And then you're kind of like, okay, technology has always been kind of thought of as very progressive. It's going to get us toward lower CO2. It's going to get us on the right side of climate change, and then this new tech is actually doing the opposite.
Yeah, right? And then, I mean, there's ways. I mean, I think some of them are trying to co-stall with solar. There's a lot of ways. A lot of it's about having battery storage. There are definitely ways that they can build these and have them done with sort of a low footprint.
You can use nuclear reactors, but then there's always like, like some people don't want that.
Right, like some kind of Navy ship with like little mini nuclear power plants.
Yeah, I mean, it's like energy is really important, and sometimes it's like, is there a plan? Like, is there a strategic plan where everybody doing like, when you talk about these gas turbine things, it seems like it's very tactical rather than thinking out a long-term strategic strategy.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because it's like any infrastructure, you do have to be planning ahead. But it's also, I think, I think different parts of the world too are in really different phases. For the U.S., a lot of it is about transitioning a lot of infrastructures that were built for fossil fuels, and then how do those get repurposed both during a transition, but then thinking about afterward. And if you have mostly a wind and solar renewable, nuclear, whatever system, what will that mean? What would the system seem to look like differently? But then you look at like a lot of places in the global south where you see a lot of the energy demand growing, and it's actually building some of these infrastructures and systems for the first time. So the question is not even about, not converting some of the infrastructures, but making sure that like if they're building renewables from the beginning and what that will look like. Versus
like in China,
and
then like Korea, and then in the East, you're seeing like extensive use of like electric cars,
right?
Like extensive use of like windmill technology and battery technology, and potentially, going with, are we going to try to get fusion? Are we going to go with fission reactors? Are we going to, where are you going to go? And it seems like if you have like a long-term plan and you have a society that's more maybe, if you have a socialist type of structure, you could probably put in that plan maybe easier than you can in some other structures.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've seen for sure is that in countries that have, I think you see two things. One is in countries where there's a pretty strong vested interest, private, large fossil fuel companies are very powerful. That's a major question, like a political question of how that, an economic question of how that's wrestled with. But then when you look at other countries that do have much more centralized states and centralized governments, they can make action happen pretty quick.
They can make it happen. Yeah, it seems like we might be, we might still be on oil, gas, coal, because there's certain interests that want it that way.
Right.
And, the billionaire that has the fission plant, well, you don't have a lot of those fission plants.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you don't really have enough people pushing that, or the new tech with the solar and the wind is getting regulated because these guys have access to this pack, and this pack says don't do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to me too. I mean, the other thing I think is that we've seen a lot of the costs of renewables have just like plummeted. I mean, they're really cheap now compared to what they were. I mean, even what people were saying 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 5 years ago. I mean, it's and we saw that in countries like Pakistan too, where people were just like, they just completely installed like in 3 months what they were planning to do over a course of several years, because they just were like using YouTube videos and figuring out how to like wire up their rooftops with solar basically. And it's pretty amazing. And, a lot of that was cheap solar panels, some of them from China. And, that I think at some point becomes like hard to compete against. And I think that's something we're seeing a lot already within a lot of, I think we've seen a lot of that in Europe actually already, where there were these kind of large, powerful fossil fuel industries for historically BP and Total, but I think that you're seeing some shifts over there too.
Well, like homeowners, like at my homeowners association, I was like the first one, and I've got like Tesla solar panels on my house.
Mm-hmm.
And then my neighbor started saying, "Well, what happens with that?" And I'm actually sending power back to the grid.
Yeah,
and I overproduce, and my bill's going down. Right?
It's amazing to me, working on these issues all the time. And then when you do talk to people, like, first of all, I mean, I do think solar panels, like not that long ago, seemed pretty futuristic looking on house rooftops. Like we forget about that. And then you see them more commonly now. But there's just still a lot of like basic questions people don't know.
Yeah,
about.
there's just
like,
some resistance by homeowners association. Initially, they didn't want to approve it. They had to fight. But then once I approved it, like 5 other homes, boom, we went and got it.
Yeah.
And then now they're saying, "Oh, it looks weird, but I like the result."
Well, yeah, and I know another one. I know someone who had done rooftop solar, but they were did solar, but they were also confused by like the credits and how the state credits were working. And like, I do think there's this sort of broader educational question around, as these technologies are fast and they're coming quick, and people are used to like things like water meters, or they're used to the utilities they already have. But this is something that's maybe different. And so I think that there are questions around it and hesitations in that regard. So I think that that's just about, people getting familiar with them as well over time.
Yeah, it's just interesting because energy systems, a lot of people just, they just turn the lights on. Yeah. They don't know, like, is this coming from a coal-fired plant? Is this coming from a gas turbine plant? Like, where's this coming from? And they say, why doesn't want my power on?
Yeah. There's a great Amory Lovins, who's for you, I think he started RMI, but he has a great quote where I think he said that people don't care about energy, they care about cold beer and hot showers, which I think is really true. That ultimately it's convenience. That's what for a lot of people energy is. It's like when the lights go out, you notice it, not so much before, and you notice on your bill. Where it's being sourced, I don't think most people know what power plant and what energy fuel source is fueling their home. That would require some kind of research. And in fact, you could go on you look at a map on our website, you could probably figure that out. But I think that there's, those are things that people just aren't curious about, because it's sort of like asking it's very abstracted. It's like, where does what
people don't think about it until like, unless you become like a climate I mean, I kind of more got into it because I'm a cancer survivor.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started looking at sources of carcinogens, and there's a lot of carcinogens coming off of some of these fossil fuels, and I'm like, I'm more. That's why I chose. Like, I want to not contribute to that. I want to try to reduce my footprint. You have to have a point of view that makes you get curious about it. If you get curious about it, then you might say, hey, maybe I'll have an electric car. Maybe I'll have solar panels. Maybe I might put even like a residential windmill on my house.
Right.
Maybe I'll look into geothermal. Yeah. Maybe, people start to ask questions if they start being curious about it. So are you seeing more trends where people are getting like curious about like, where does their power come from?
I do. I mean, I think that I would say a couple of things. I think what you're saying there about how people can get curious about climate and about energy for different reasons, right, is really true. I think that that's true for me. It's not so, coming at it from like a worker angle. It's not so much just about, people who are like, you're an environmentalist and that's what you care about. And so now this is your issue. But I think that a lot of people get into it, cost is a big one. We're seeing in Europe a big push when they were getting, after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, they saw all these gas price spikes. And so there was all these questions around like energy security and how that relates to renewables.
Yeah, they got Russian pipelines, don't they?
Right, they do.
They could just shut it off.
Right, and so it's a good question. It's like, well, you can't shut off the sun and the wind, and so like if you can control that, that's a, that's like a little bit of a determination for yourself there. And so there's a lot of different reasons I think people come, and I think actually that's maybe one of the most important points is about being able to talk to people where they're at and understanding what those pieces are. Because there's never going to be one issue that rallies everybody. I mean, climate has tried to be that issue that's rallied everybody, and I think it does, especially certain generational,
younger
generations. Yeah, younger generations I think are pretty motivated and activists on this around in opinion polls that I've seen, but I think other people are going to come to it for different reasons, and it's
well, price is the big reason. I think like if your price is cheap, you'll stay on whatever is the cheapest. If it suddenly starts going wild, then you start saying, what are my alternatives?
Yeah. When you see the
wood pellet stove or a solar panel for my water heater, is like you start seeing people like, oh, like if my oil price goes this high or my natural gas or my propane's this high, then suddenly the price forces them to make a decision. Right.
And I think also seeing other people take those steps and then like bringing them back. I mean, I've seen people who are like pulling out phones that can show like, that they paid $0 and then, how, their bill was like nothing. And then, compared to what other people are paying, I think that they're starting to put these pieces together.
Yeah, start to see it. Look, price is always going to do it. Like once you start seeing, and then, basically energy security. Right. In terms of like, if you have trouble with your transmission lines and they're always going down because you have bad weather,
right?
Then you start I want to live off grid because I'm tired of these lines going down every time there's a big thunderstorm, or every time there's this or that.
Yeah.
Then people start saying, well, I want my own geothermal, like my solar. It's like, I'm off grid. I still got power. You don't.
Yeah. I mean, I think I think there were stories about that actually with the hurricane recently, I think in Jamaica and things like that, that there were some things that could come back online a little bit faster than others after the hurricane. I think we've definitely seen that after some natural disasters, but I think price will be a big one. I think the proof, you're always going to have like the early adopters, and then you're going to have people who are going to come later, and some people who just need to see the, I don't know what would be like the tipping point. They need to see like that build of the.
Yeah, they start seeing like if my price is like went from $500 a month to $1,000 a month. Yeah, then it's like, oh, something's got to change.
Right, right.
It's like suddenly, like it's not only like if it's not a big, it's not causing you duress.
Yeah.
Then you're like, you won't think about it. Mm-hmm. It's like everybody, like I remember in the 70s, everybody's got cars that get 10 miles to the gallon.
Right. And the gas crisis.
Running around with my big V8 Hemi. Right. Yeah. And then suddenly the gas costs crazy amount. It's like, whoa, that Hemi is costing me money. Yeah. So now suddenly I have this little Honda, or I have this little Toyota, or I have a Datsun. And so things change because the market changed.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, like, it's not, it didn't matter when it's 10 cents a gallon.
Yeah.
When it goes to $1, you're like, oh, that matters.
Right. I mean, it's amazing to me too, I think, about, you're talking about like the long range planning and what the future will be like, which is pretty exciting to think, because if you would have looked in the like early 20th century, you were seeing a lot of like electric streetcars being built and
Oh
trams
yeah.
being built, and
We
they
have
were
them in the
all over.
Northeast. There
Yeah,
were all these streetcars. I
right.
didn't even know the history, but there was streetcars all over New England.
Yeah, and there
They
were a lot
tore
of
up
them
all
were
the
electric.
tracks, but
Yeah,
there was like they were everywhere.
yeah, exactly. Then you had the Model T, and the Model T
Yeah.
Ford, and then all of a sudden it's like, the road took precedent. So I mean, if you would put money, I probably in like the early 20s on like where some of that urban transit was going, you probably would have thought it was going to go more into
Yeah, we would have
into
thought it
that.
was electric.
Yeah,
You would have thought they would have gone with subway systems, like the streetcars are like on the street subway system,
right,
but it would work in smaller towns.
right,
But people made the choice to like we want to have individual cars and not have this infrastructure. Where in
right.
Europe there was more like rail was more significant. And
Yeah,
some of our cities are more like Boston, New York,
it's
highly sophisticated. For the U.S., not what's in Japan. I lived in Japan. Like our rail's not what it is in Japan.
Japan. Japan was the only country I've ever been in where like the train left early. Like it was like they pulled in. It was like it wasn't about being on time. It was like we're gonna leave 5 minutes early.
Yeah,
And I
it's
was
just
like, wow, okay.
the amount the subway system. Like I lived for 2 years and I could jump on a BR line, and it would just go under my building,
Yeah,
and I wouldn't even have to go on a street. I'd just go right into the building where I worked. I didn't even have to hit the street.
yeah,
And the subway, like I could get to the subway in like 5-minute walk from my apartment.
right.
It was just like you didn't have to use a car at all.
Yeah,
It's just a walking city. I mean, the city was set up for walking.
right.
Most of Tokyo is just a walkable city.
Yeah. I mean, it is. Yeah. I mean, a lot of that too is just about like the settlement of different parts of the country. Also, I think it's you do. I mean, the further west you go, you get these cities that are a lot more built around rail in the first place. They were like stops for rail, and they have wide set streets, and they're kind of made for they have still agricultural economies and things. So it is like an interesting. The U.S. is just as a big country like that. I mean, growing up in the U.K., I think you saw. Streets that were made like cobblestones for horses and buggies, and it's like
Yeah.
a lot there. You can't really drive a Hummer.
Can't drive.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just interesting, like the focus. And then now when we move toward, some of these electric systems, it's like you actually could charge the car on the street if you built the structure to do it. So the cars would be like street cars getting charged from infrastructure. I've heard like maybe some Scandinavian countries have been playing with stuff like that. But yeah, there's a different point. It's wholly modern infrastructure that's kind of saying, why not?
Yeah.
Let's go toward other ideas.
For sure. I mean, we didn't have gas stations in every corner at one point, right? We had to build those and make that the case. And the highway system in the US is actually still fairly recent. Like, I always tell people it's like 1950s,
Yeah, it's
60s,
like
not that long ago. It's like within people's like lifetimes. And a lot of people forget that it's, this stuff hasn't always been that way. And there's a lot of exciting infrastructure you could do around, EVs and things that I think would be really, and even just mass transit that people have.
Yeah, less lighter rail or more like rail that's a lot like micro rail that adds smaller cars that are more maneuverable. They can come off onto the street and then come back onto the grid, I mean, there's all kinds of ideas that could be more efficient, provide people better transportations, and more people could actually, like if you have a high-speed rail between like New Hampshire and Boston,
right?
Then there are people in Concord, New Hampshire that can work downtown Boston. It doesn't take them 4 hours to get back and forth. They could get there in like 20 minutes, which means there's more opportunity.
Yeah.
So you could have people who actually have a skill set could be matched with the job.
Right.
So then if you actually have better efficiencies of these skill sets can actually get to the job, and transportation is not a problem.
Yeah. I mean,
that's a whole nother point of view.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of like these bullet train, just having these large, fast rails and having more cities in the US connected through something a little bit more faster is always pretty exciting when I hear about it. Like I always hear about there's going to be a new fast connection someplace, and then maybe it doesn't happen. But I've seen a lot of different maps that people have drawn up over the years. And I think a lot, I don't know. I think that a lot of that would actually get used. I mean, people fly a lot and they drive a lot. So I think that there would be an interest in having some of that rail transit would be quite popular. I was thinking though, I was in New Hampshire recently and I drove, what is it, the K Highway? Is that what it's called? It's like the really beautiful through the White Mountain.
Oh yeah, that
Yeah.
one. Yeah, that's a nice one.
Yeah. So that's something you still have to drive.
Yeah, there's stuff we have to drive. But it's just like I used to take a bus to get to Boston for the opportunities in Cambridge.
Yeah.
And I was like 4 hours on the road every day in order to get there, on a bus, and then finally I would get to the red line and get on it. But it's like, if I was in Japan, that wouldn't have been a 2 hour. It wouldn't be 4 hours worth of my time.
Right. Yeah. No, there's always
15 minutes of my time.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that there's always going to be a, I mean, if you've got infrastructure that's old, I think, which is the case that, and I think that people also like don't think about that too much. It's like you were saying with energy being abstract and people turn the light switches on. I don't think people think too much about infrastructure actually, and like how old until you have to fix something, right? Like,
yeah,
you realize your sewer line is like super old and it's like made of clay and it's like falling apart, and then you have to realize you've got to do something with it, and or the lead pipes or something, that you've got like in an old city, and but until then it's like invisible. Even if like power lines, I think people just tune them out almost. It's they're there, but they're also not. Like people don't notice them as much as. So it's part of the struggle, I think, with infrastructure in general, is that it's something I think most people agree on, that they want everything to work better and faster, but then
it's kind of like whether or not we should have gone with Tesla versus Edison in terms of wireless transmission of electricity. Like Tesla was working on an idea that would have been wireless transmission, and that actually I think is really like, maybe it's not 21st century, maybe it's end of 21st century, but it seems like that is a solution to a problem that, the physical infrastructure of power lines would be solved by having non-physical structure, wireless electricity transmission.
Yeah.
Right? And that seems to be like, it would be more convenient and more efficient to me, but I don't know where that is.
I mean, well, when power lines were invented, man, they were like, they were considered like they used to call it sending coal by wire, or like white coal, because it was just like, people were just like shocked with this idea that you could, create power one place and send it to another. And it wasn't actually like, it didn't involve driving a truck, or didn't involve
to do it. You bring your load of coal.
It seemed like magic.
Yeah, it seems like magic, but it's kind of old fashioned now.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And they're building, I mean, these really ultra high voltage lines right now in China. They've got about 40 of these really big ones that are just pulling in a lot of power from some of their northern provinces that are very coal heavy, like Shaanxi, and then they're pulling them into the major metropolises. And it's like, that's also something we don't really have in the US, is these really big lines that are capable of handling a lot of voltage.
But would wireless ever really get adopted, or people scared that they couldn't monetize it? If you actually have wireless transmission, it's harder to monetize the service.
Yeah, I don't know. And I actually have no idea. I mean, I think, a lot of that infrastructure is hard to monetize anyway. I think that's why you end up getting the governments having to, they're building it in part because of the fact that it's not really there's no profit.
Expensive to build the structure.
Yeah, it's expensive, and it's going to be no real margin for it. They'd have to create like a new business model for how to charge people to use certain power lines at certain times of the day and things like that. So they end up becoming the public utilities. But it'd be interesting. I have no idea.
Yeah, because I would think the way you control it is like how you receive it, and your receiver. In order to have the receiver, you'd have to pay for the receiver. But then you get people that kind of hack things. It's like, if it's coming through the air and I have a receiver, I can just get my receiver and I don't have to be on the plan.
Right.
So maybe that's kind of like why Edison said, well, that's not a good idea. We should have the lines.
Using somebody else's Wi-Fi or something.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. You could kind of steal it. Mm-hmm. I think that might have been maybe the impetus, like, whoa, that's not a good business model.
I know. I mean, there was a early monopoly around the utilities pretty quickly. So I don't know though why that happened actually.
Yeah, I've always suspected that like it's that Wi-Fi stealing thing. That's why you wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
But so global energy systems, are companies actually working? Like, I know in the US there's energy coming from Canada and Canada going back. It's going back and forth, right?
Yeah.
is that just a common thing? When European countries are kind of all commingled in the EU, so I would expect that
For
that's
sure.
the case. But are there like more global positioning strategies? Like,
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. There's a lot of like transnational nodes of connection between different kinds of and it's actually really important part sometimes of grid planning is knowing what kinds of energy you can get from across the border. The problem is, I mean, that comes back to a data question. Sometimes people don't even know. You don't even know what projects are being developed across the border unless somebody's kind of, that's a lot of the work we do is try and keep track of that stuff so everyone can, even governments and investors and everyone can kind of see it, and it's out there in the open. But there is a lot of work around sort of energy modeling, and I'm not an energy modeler, but there's a lot of work that's been done around that, I know, where people have shown what kind of capacities and cross-country lines could be built and how that could like improve efficiencies of systems. So Europe is a really good example, but you see that, you do see it everywhere. You do see a lot of that kind of cross-border grids.
and also because competition, like if you think about a capitalist system in the competitive market, free market,
Yeah,
versus something like if the energy infrastructure is so expensive to build the structure, to build the lines, to build, so then you tend to maybe be more monopolistic, less competition. So if people, like typical capitalism, the more there are players in the market, then I could go around trying to find the best price.
right.
Right. But if the market is hard to get into, you only have so many players in the market.
Yeah.
Does the future look like, because you can have all these different forms of energy, that you actually would have the consumer have a choice and saying, I want to pick this form, this service provider rather than this one. And I actually have access to multiple providers.
Right. I mean, I don't know if they'll get to a point. I mean, for one is if you're say living in a place that's powered by a coal plant and you're able to put solar on your own roof and kind of actually be part of the system in that way, that is a little bit of a power shift in some ways. And I don't know if people always think of it that way in terms of how you're relating with the utility versus other people. But I don't know if they'll ever have a system that's fully designed where you'll have kind of like choosing a provider, like a cell phone plan or something, where you can kind of go down a list and pick, who do I want to be my utility provider? And I think a lot of it is about, because of those infrastructures being public utilities, and because you just have the way that system is developed, and also for efficiency reasons, a lot of them are running together. Like how would you have, it's almost like when they were building the railroads, like one thing people forget is that a lot of times when they're building these transcontinentals across the country, this is the historian in me, a lot of the lines were actually, they started building lines side by side, different companies trying to build, and it was like totally inefficient. It's like two train lines next to each other.
Like Pacific's doing this,
exactly,
and this guy's doing that.
And they would literally be like, right, and maybe one's a little bit of a different size. It was ridiculous a little bit. So they had to, that was really inefficient, and you're kind of doing the same thing as somebody else. I think that we already have this system created around our grids, and so I think it's less about shaking up kind of the grid, shaking up the providers and utilities as much as it is just kind of getting more of the renewable energy online, and making it flexible enough and that people can actually be,
can you start thinking about, like, if you get like all the homes to be generating electricity, now they're providers,
right?
So then you could think about in the future, you could get homeowners associations that get like 99% of their houses with panels.
Yeah.
And then they go into consortium, or they go into a collective and say, we're going to push this energy back, and we want to negotiate what we get for putting the energy back into the grid.
Yeah. They have they're like microgrids. And yeah. I mean, that's something that you could see taking shape too. Yeah. I mean, once you have enough,
capacity. So once and then you think about like, this company goes and builds a tidal system, right? And then they have like windmills here, and then we have a solar farm here. You get these companies building solar farms, and they feed in, and it's like, well, I got a company that got solar farms in 10 states.
Yeah.
And I'm going to feed it to here, and I'm going to negotiate, like, okay,
Yeah.
Maybe I want to be able to tell people you can get your energy from this solar farm if you pay this plan. Like you can say it's coming from this solar farm, it's coming from this tidal farm. Tidal thing is like people might say the consumer of the future is like, I want to know that 90% of my energy is coming from renewables.
Right.
And I'm making a selection that I want that ability to have that energy come into my house.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's there's so much investment happening too right now in the renewable energy space, like way more, like, dollar for dollar, just a lot more than what's going into fossil fuels. And I think that it is a reminder that there's a giant sort of entrepreneurial business opportunity out there. And I think we think a lot about this around AI. I see a lot of these kind of reels pop up on my socials that are saying like, there's these opportunities in AI, but I think in the clean energy space and some of these questions that you're asking, like there's, we don't quite know who like the next, it's almost like not knowing what the next, Ford or Chevy is going to be. Those kind of major companies in the renewable energy space, I think, are just developing. They might not be 10 years from now the same companies they are today.
Yeah. Because they have this like opportunity, like the new Edison, new Con Ed comes like, hey, he's a brand new tape capability, and if the fusion hits, that's like boom. Because they keep on having fusion to actually be able to survive. The fusion reaction is like lasted longer and longer. And so if they, along with their ability with the AI, is kind of co-parallel development.
Right.
So once you have AI that's sophisticated enough to keep that reaction going, controllably and safely, eventually fusion is like the science fiction, like panacea.
Right.
That's supposed to bring out like a whole new age.
Yeah.
Get their, energy costs down.
Yeah, there's a lot of
stuff that could happen.
I agree. There's a lot of science fiction like opportunities right now. I feel like sometimes we're living in that. We're seeing it. We're seeing a lot of that happen.
That potentially can happen because we see these exponential capabilities with the tech. With the robots. The AI is hand in hand with robotics. Now we're actually going to see robots that mirror what we saw in science fiction.
Right.
Because the AI enables robots to be what we imagined them they could be.
Yeah.
And even more.
I mean, the exponential, I think a lot about that in terms of energy because it's, I think one of the stats I've heard is that, solar is the fastest growing energy source for use in history. So if you just look at like how quickly, it's like a line that goes, straight up in terms of how fast people are adopting it.
Yeah, and the panels in terms of what levels of light they can capture and how efficient they are. You had the ones that are on the spaceships. They're on the satellites. The ones I have on my house are kind of like that. They're like really advanced compared to what was in the 70s, right?
Right.
These things are pulling in multiple bands.
Yeah.
And they're super efficient. And that capability is just exponentially getting more efficient, more energy transfer for how much sunlight they're getting.
Right.
All the time.
Yeah.
So eventually, theoretically, they could handle the load.
Yeah.
The demand,
I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. And it's I think getting that capacity, getting it on grid, getting battery storage in place so that, you can have some flexibility with how that, getting it pushed out during peak times. That's the thing about energy is they kind of have to build it for like the big, it's like not for daily use almost. It's for those, it's the extreme hot days, the extreme cold days.
You need to have the capacity, if you can store it in, and with our battery technology, the newest thing coming down the pike is like, the idea of having these solid state batteries.
Right.
That is, Toyota's got solid state batteries like production 2027 going from like average, car batteries going 200 miles, maybe 300.
Yeah.
Right? These batteries can go 675 miles to 1,000 miles.
Right.
The solid state batteries. So their capacity to hold energy and be stable and not blow up and not catch on fire. Like that's the next revolution in electrics is the solid state battery technology allows you to have cars that have 700-mile range.
Right.
More stable and, cheaper.
Right.
Then the same thing for your house. It can hold more energy for the off-peak time.
Yeah. And I mean, exactly. I mean, in terms of charging too, I think it's it might be, it was some kind of EVs, like maybe two-wheelers, and I can't remember which country. They had these mopeds maybe, and it was like maybe India, but it was like these batteries, you just swapped it out. It was like it was just changing a battery in your bike basically, and then you would be able to, you didn't have to stop and charge it. You could just go to a station. It was like a wall. You pull the new battery out. You put the
there were
in.
early cars, like early before the gas cars. There were car battery designs where you just swap them out.
Yeah,
back in the 20s or 30s or something. I read about it. It's the same kind of idea.
And I mean that would be, I think for a lot of people too, the charging of the battery is an issue. But you can also do it. A lot of people are building it so they can do it in their own homes and their garages. And then, I remember talking to an electrician. It was like, well, you can build. You basically put a generator. It's like power goes out, it's going to be in your garage. You can actually power your home from
with
this
the car.
Unit. Yeah.
The cars are like a lot of the Teslas and some other higher end can actually act as your backup generator.
Right.
If you build, like I already have the panels, solar panels, so I got the Tesla panel where it can charge my car with my solar panel. It only charges the car with the solar.
Yeah.
You can control it. And you can say, well, if I don't have it, then I can go off the grid. But if I do have it, I can only charge the car with solar.
Yeah.
And the same thing, and then you take the car and you can charge the house with the car.
Right. I mean, my perspective too on adoption is that like all it takes is that to happen a couple of times and you see your neighbors with the lights on and the power's out in your place. And then all of a sudden, you start putting these pieces together. Whether or not you act right away.
What are you doing there? Like, oh yeah, my backup is my car.
Right. I mean, that's how that stuff happens, as people see that in action and makes an impact on them.
Yeah, because it's not science fiction anymore. It's like it's the real deal. But it's like and then the idea like the charging times, with the high speed chargers, they can charge way faster. The technology exponentially getting it. So it's it used to be like take you like an hour. Now you can do it 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
It exponentially that's going to come down eventually to like 5 minutes.
Right.
And then it's like, well, that's about the much time that you take the gas up your car and go to the bathroom and pick up some snacks. It's like, so that's not going to be a big deal.
Exactly. And I mean, I don't know about you, but that's always been a complaint I've heard too from like people who are skeptical is that, when you're low on gas, you stop at the gas station, you fill up, you're back on the road. You don't have to, you're not going to be late for work if you got to get gas real quick. But if you forgot to charge, it's a different story. And I think that's itself started to kind of
starting to come down with the fast chargers. They can get to like 80%, 70%. You could get it done in like 10 minutes. You got enough to keep on going.
Yeah.
So that's not a half hour. And that's some of these fast chargers. Like, I was looking at them, there's a question there, like, does it degrade the battery if you keep on using it? Eventually it does. But, is this the tech? Is this, we're living in this world? And then you've got people who's like, okay, can they afford the tech? Can you afford to get the panels versus like, I just want to have my propane. I just want to have my pellet stove. Yeah. I want to still run like a coal stove if you had one, but like different parts of the world is like, maybe they don't have the infrastructure. Maybe they don't have the capacity to put down a tin roof.
Yeah.
I'm still using pellets. I'm still using wood. I'm still using propane because I'm not even connected to anything.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point too. It's never going to be one size fits all, and I think that's also partially about. I mean, some of it is when they're building out new energy systems and meeting energy demand, especially like in the global South. There's going to be a lot of questions around a lot of it's just infrastructure in general, right? And like, what are you going to be need and what can people meet economically? And I do think for in lots of countries, Europe is a good example, the US, but there have been efforts to kind of provide some kind of incentive for people to take some of these steps, whether it's through tax credits or something else. But again, like that's not going to be, it's not going to work the same way everywhere. Every place is going to have its own solution, I think, to some of that. And it's going to be based on, probably what the existing systems already are set up like and what they need to accomplish, what the economies are, what outside the OECD and what are the needs.
Well, I think you need, people always want the backup. They want a backup plan. Like even for my house, the backup plan is a gas generator.
Right.
Like, so like so I have a total backup plan to go with a gas line generator that does the whole house.
Yeah.
Now I also have, and that's kind of like my backup for if my solar and my battery thing doesn't work. I'm kind of crazy. I decided to have like multiple backups. I
Okay.
could have
Yeah.
just stuck with the batteries, but it's like, well, if something goes wrong with the batteries, then I have this. So I
Yeah.
just like so you still fall back on the fossil fuel, but that was like the last ditch thing. Like if the
Right.
solar, the battery doesn't work and the panel go out or something goes, then I got this.
Yeah.
So there's still like a use case to have the fossil fuel in certain cases, like why somebody might have a Prius
Right.
instead of having a full electric, because they're like, well, what if the electric grid goes down? I can't charge it. Like I still want to have something, right? So people can have one foot in one door, the other in another.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's been, honestly, I think every step towards like a new new energy resources and transitions have always had that. I mean, there was a lot of people who, like, we forget about this, but they opposed a lot of people did not want to move to like a coal-based economy. They were fine with timber. They were fine with mussels.
Wood.
Yeah, they didn't, it seemed pretty expensive to go far away and dig a hole in the ground and 300 feet or something, and
have to ship it around on trains.
Yeah, ship it around. And people are like, why do we need to do that? And, it took root in a lot of these larger heavy industries and then spread from there. But, people burning coal in the house was also, it's like really dirty. And, so there was a lot of people that had resisted that actually. But over time, as the infrastructure's developed around it, people were able to understand.
And then they transitioned to like the fuel oil because the fuel oil seemed like always cleaner than the coal.
Right.
And then you had the natural gas, and that's even cleaner than that.
Yeah. I mean, that's been and I think that's
the gold standard, I guess, for most people. Fossil fuel is like the natural gas and the propane. It's kind of what people use, right?
Right. I mean, the gas, there was a big, early 2010s, I think, was the big push around gas as like a transition fuel. And that also gas was a cleaner burning. And in terms of carbon, but there's also these big problems with methane and just like what methane does to the atmosphere is a super pollutant and it very potent.
You don't want to get away from it.
So it's been I think a little bit of probably the last 5 years, maybe a little longer, or kind of a wake up call too around that actually, a lot of the narratives around gas don't quite pan out when you actually think of just how much it leaks from extraction through the transport and these.
Well, even like a gas stove. For a long time, I had a gas stove, but then when I went to solar, I switched to an electric stove.
Yeah,
because it was made more sense to run the electric because, I'm using this fossil fuel, but now I've got solar power, so I can go with the electric stove.
Right.
So I as a cook, I like the gas stove for the flame.
Yeah, I mean that's the biggest.
Talking about the flame when you're cooking,
right?
That I kind of was holding on to until eventually I got a convection oven. Like, oh, this works. Okay, I can use it.
Yeah. It is. I mean, I'm not like much of a cook at all. So that it's funny to me that because I hear that a lot, is that it is like it makes a difference with the cooking. But that's I feel like that's a very niche argument.
Yeah, it's a very niche
popular. Thing. It's like people like the very particular taste of the food with a gas stove.
When you're grilling meat and stuff, if you use a broiler, that's a flame broiler.
Right. I mean, if you're
about the way the flame hits the meat, that it feels. But the convection oven convinced me because it actually it's more even.
Right.
And the gas was sometimes uneven.
Yeah.
And the convection is way more predictable and actually is like, I actually was very surprised. I did not think it was going to be as good. And now I'm like, I don't think I'd go back to gas now. Because I'm like, I just found it like, wow, this works better all the time. It's like my pies and cakes come out more even. And
for sure.
None of the problems I thought that I never realized how many problems I was actually having with the gas.
I mean, to me, the scarier part of gas is just that there's in the home is that there have been studies that show like that it's kind of always leaking a little bit.
It's leaking, That's
so you're bringing that in. So it's like asthma conditions can worsen. There's a lot of these health impacts that we don't take into consideration.
It's a carcinogen. I mean, you're kind of giving off a carcinogen,
right.
in your house.
And it just sits in your kitchen.
You're polluting your house, and then in New England, we had this situation one time where this gas company over pressurized the lines
Mm-hmm.
and caused this crazy incident where houses were like blowing up.
Oh, wow.
They
Yeah.
were like houses were they were catching on fire in the basement because like the pressure went and it increased the pressure in the natural gas like heaters
Right.
and water heaters
Yeah.
actually blew up the houses
Right.
because the pressure line went psh, and they got so much gas and then the houses like exploded. And like there was tons of them that happened. There's like a whole
Where was this at?
this was in New England outside of
Mm.
Boston.
Wow.
They
Wow.
maybe like in 19
Okay. Yeah, I never heard that story. I mean, there's so
yeah, it was
much.
crazy. They actually made a mistake. Somebody messed up. The gas company overpressurized the lines for
Right.
multiple towns.
Wow.
It was like there was this one line that fed a bunch of towns.
Yeah.
And then went boom, 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 boom. And then like the fire departments from multiple towns were like running all over the place to handle like these house explosions. And we're like,
yeah. I mean, the gas is like no joke. I mean, I think I know stories too about like in West Virginia that there were these some of the mines, they have they have so much methane underground that they were backing up into people's basements, some of them. So like as they're mining and the methane's getting into basements and then they're having these, and like it's just that's it's
scary.
It is scary. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I was like my grandpa was in a couple of mine explosions because of the gas.
Right. Oh yeah, definitely.
That was the big fear that miners had, and he had singed ears from a couple of the explosions because they just flare and miners had to duck.
Yeah.
It was like they would survive. Sometimes, he survived the two of them that happened. But he had some friends that didn't survive some of them because they were really bad. But yeah.
No, it's wild to me because I think, methane for so long for mining companies was always a safety issue. And it's like, we just need to get the methane out of the mine so the miners can work safely. And obviously it wasn't foolproof all the time, but they built all these ventilation systems and they do this, but then the outcome of that is basically to pump it up into the atmosphere like a chimney. So they just
then you're contributing to a whole nother problem.
Right, exactly.
It started getting identified when people say, hey, maybe we need to reduce the footprint. Maybe all this like fossil fuel activity is not necessarily the way we want to go.
Well, exactly. And getting a little shy too about, I think if you know what the methane is in the mine and you're going to ventilate it out, but no one really wants to talk about what are the number of companies and globally that are actually reporting what their emissions are.
Yeah,
it's very low, but that there's people can measure it with like a handheld device if they wanted to. So I think that there's a lot of that's that kind of information should be more accessible and more available.
Yeah, nobody ever wants to put the bad news out, especially when the regulators come around and say you're emitting too much, and now you got to build a control, and then nobody wants to pay for the control.
Yeah,
nobody wants to go and say, well, now you got to bottle that gas. Now you got to store that gas.
Right.
And then you've got to build for that.
Yeah.
I would think the management, like that's costing money. It's not making money.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah. For mining, methane is purely a waste product. For gas industries, it's like a commodity. So, it is funny because they're just trying to like get rid of it as fast as they can, burn it, and, flare it if they need to. But it's not, something that they're trying to make money off of.
Yeah. It's winter things like, couldn't you go send it to these guys? And then maybe you can sell it.
Yeah, it's funny to me. I mean, a lot of I was once looking into like these utilization projects for methane, and they're actually pretty rare globally. I think I can't like 150 around the world or something. And I think partially it's just about logistics. You've got to get kind of coal and gas companies to collaborate, and a lot of times they'll go into abandoned mines and they'll start trying to use that to utilize excess methane in those abandoned mines, but
the mining company itself never thought to do that.
Yeah, the mining company, and oftentimes, the methane could be, not
at the quality they need.
Not the quality they need, and also just so dispersed, that it's not going to be, it's not going to be
enough to be able to use it. Then you'd have to build a whole infrastructure to pressurize it.
Right, and I think it's that building of that infrastructure, which is why those projects are very rare, actually, and because people have talked a lot about coal mine methane utilization, and like we can use that methane instead of just sending it to the atmosphere.
Could you sell it to chemical companies that need it?
Right.
If there are chemical processes that require it, couldn't you build like a pipeline and send it to them?
Yeah, I mean, and that's I think that's the basic idea. But then when you're like, so who's done this successfully?
Maybe that's one of the things where the
government where it gets
build it. Like that's one of these situations where industry wouldn't do it, but if the government happened to do it, then they would like, okay, we'll use it now.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen, there's definitely a few of them out there, and I think the U.S. has a couple, and I think that like Australia, China, these projects exist around the world. It's just that they're so few and far between. And plus, with like what you're talking about at the top, like about the mountaintop removal and surface mining, you can't at that point. You can't. There's no. You can't capture the methane because yours is a giant pit. Yeah.
Yeah, you're just blowing it up, and so you start to think about like, are people making tactical or strategic decisions? They're making long-term or short-term. Can you get different industries to kind of align and say, hey, we could be partners. This could work out if we actually thought about it in a less competitive way, and actually pulled our heads together and say, let's solve this problem.
Right.
Let's give this person this thing they're looking for.
Yeah.
Let's give me what I'm looking for. Let's all work together. And sometimes it's like there doesn't seem to be an impetus to do that unless you get somebody kind of outside and say, hey, you guys, why don't you put your heads together?
Yeah. I mean, I think we see, it's interesting. I think that there are moments where you definitely, I mean, the, COP 30 is happening right now, right? And so people are meeting in Brazil. The governments are meeting in Brazil for the climate conference, UN Climate Summit, and conference of parties. And that's happening right now, where people are having those the governments are sitting down trying to have those conversations about what kind of commitments they want to make, and pledges that they want to make in terms of their emissions, but then also, how that they can work within these industries, government industry partnerships, and, what role CSOs can play in that, civil society organizations. And sometimes those conversations come out really well. Sometimes they're disappointing. And I think that it just, it's always hard to know exactly how that's going to break.
Yeah, because you just want people to, like, is everybody really going toward a goal of, moving toward progress?
Right.
Because I think, of course, we've got these legacy fossil fuel capabilities.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that they still want to be on the table, right?
Right.
However, it's the 21st century and we're moving toward certain things, and like it makes sense.
Yeah.
To maybe you need to diversify.
It's funny to me because it's such a hard, in some ways I always think that this is supposed to be hard. There's that. Sometimes I show this picture of like, NASA has it. I think it's called like the world at night. The European Space Agency has it too. It's just a picture of, it's like the black marble, the world lit up from space, and it's at night, and you just see light. What you're looking at is like the grid. You're looking at, it's like the biggest machine, if you think about it, in the world. And it's like, it is going to be hard work to get the biggest machine in the world to function differently in different parts, and bring, and that is hard work. And I do think that like sometimes just the progress that has been made, if you think about where even like a country like the United States was 15 years ago, there was like over 150 proposed coal plants that people were planning, that the Bush-Cheney administration had proposed to build out. Now, if you look at around the world, in all the OECD countries, I mean, there's less than 5. A lot of those plants, those 150 didn't even get built. So it's just like, for anyone working on the issue, that like the change has been like an unprecedented. Things that people didn't think was likely or they were hopeful for. Some of it happened a lot faster than they thought, actually.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that the tech revolution, is going to increase our capability to have, I think the consumer is going to, like a certain generation of consumers is going to want to know, like when people want to know, what is the CO2 impact of this company?
Right.
There are people that are going to want to know, like, where's my energy coming from?
Yeah.
Like, and they're going to start measuring people on what are we doing there? And, there's maybe a generation that doesn't care, but there's a generation coming up that does care.
Mm-hmm.
And the more climate change disasters that happen, the more they're going to care.
Yeah. I mean,
I
we're
think that
seeing,
line's going to go up.
yeah, I mean, I think we see that for a lot of companies that their CO2 emissions, people care a lot about what those are. And I think we see investors caring a lot about what those are. And the risks of some of these projects that are going to increase emissions, and what's the likelihood of supporting those and financing those. I think that those are all questions that are happening now, and it's having an impact now. And I think you're only going to see that get more. But I think also too, just people demanding that information and saying like, we want transparency around.
Yeah, because we get the modern consumer is plugged into the ether of the net.
Yeah.
And so even if you don't give me the info, I will go find it.
Right.
You know, then
Right.
you have the new consumer that say, okay, you won't tell me, I'm going to go look for it.
Yeah.
And then they start, and if they more people that look for it, then it's like they start making decisions whether you tell them or not.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, that's definitely the case. I think people want that. They want that information for sure. And they want it open. And I think also just so people can operate with the same sort of foundation of facts and information that people know, like, okay, this is what this number is. It's not like you get 3 different numbers from 3 different people, that you can get a single source.
Yeah, you look at people who are doing like independent agencies and monitoring people, and people who are actually independently checking those numbers.
Yeah. The
And
verifying them.
verifying it, got the
It's
end notes, got the footnotes, got the actual documentation. Like, yeah, that's
no,
not made up.
definitely.
That's real.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's like I was saying, when I was researching with groups in like Montana, like the very first thing that would happen to them was that they just didn't know the market value of the coal. They didn't know the resource of the coal underground. Companies would come in trying to negotiate with them, and they didn't know any of that information. And so they would go and they would ask like the government, and maybe the government didn't have that. So then they were asking the industry, which already had its hand in the pot anyway. So there's a little conflict of interest there, because they were the experts. So I think that there's this, it's amazing like how we have actually shifted a lot of times the information that is out there now. And a lot of times it's civil society groups that are publishing this. We're able to get access to information that is like, it's not, it's coming from a third party, and it is being vetted, and it's being verified and fact checked and, footnoted, but people are able to get access to the information. I think that just builds a lot of trust in what you're,
compared to like, if you remember, if there's a situation with like people like back in the oil days, right?
Yeah.
And you like how much money are you actually getting out of this well?
Right.
And people were like, you're not really giving me the right number, are you?
Oh yeah. I mean, they were, yeah. I mean, it was like they could buy, acre, cents on the acre in order to like, the tiny royalties. And then it would be like, an incredibly profitable.
Yeah. And then they're like, right, well, how much is this well really making, and how much are you giving me?
Right. Right.
And it's like, I don't trust your number.
Right. Right.
So
And
that makes you verify that.
Yeah. And I think we're probably in a little bit of a new era too, with transparency around, how many panels they're going to put up, how many wind farms they're going to put up. If you're like a farmer and you're leasing land for a company to do that, or installing a wind turbine, which can, make, several $1,000s a year, just in terms of, so I think that there's a lot of that where
you can actually get the real number, like what's this actually producing versus what the sales guy told you.
Yeah, what's you can't see underground, and these kind of, they call them the split estate, where they would own the mineral reserves underneath, and you can't actually see that. So difficult to
assess what you're getting. But I want to thank you for being on the show. We kind of went over a little bit, but we've got your QR code there. The people go to RyanDriskellTate.com. If people scan that and go to your website, what do they find?
Just some like, work I've written, and, things studies I've been a part of, and things like that. I mean, I came from an academic background, so it's a little bit of like a portfolio there that people can access and check out and get more information about things. And yeah, feel free to reach out also too if people have questions. I always love the 15-minute coffee chat. I think we're incredibly privileged as a world right now that you can talk to anybody you want for like, a few minutes of, yeah.
Yeah, it's just awesome. To be able to do these podcasts is like, it's a different world. We would have had to do these in TV studios like 10, 15 years ago.
Exactly.
And now we can just do it pretty high quality
Yeah,
without having to be in a TV station.
definitely.
Thank you very much for being on
Great.
the show.
Yeah, thanks so much, Phantom.